Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1372. The topic is nutrition. The title is a case study. We're going to look at advice to get unstuck. So we had a listener, and somebody I've helped in the past send back in that they're kind of a little stuck and they're wanting to know kind of what the next steps are. I thought this was a good situation for us to cover through a podcast because they are doing a lot. They're tracking their nutrition, they're training, they're staying active, but they seem to be stuck and they're not sure kind of what to do. And this is typically, like, sometimes I'll get people to come to me and they haven't done really anything at all yet. And then, so they're not really asking to get unstuck. They're just like saying, what do I do? But if somebody's stuck, that tends to kind of imply that they've started. So they've started with something, they got some results maybe, and then it just kind of plateaued and they don't know what to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I want to read through the email that they sent, and then we'll go through the steps of what I would think through to give them the advice. And I haven't determined what the advice is yet. So this will be fun. We're kind of going to figure this out together. So it says, "Hey Rob, hope you're doing well. Just wanted to run something by you. I've been doing different programs for months now. Starting at the end of April, I signed up for First Form app, which is PHORM, First Form app, so that I could use it to track macros because I felt like maybe my results were lacking because of my food. 100% if you're training and you're doing exercise but you're not kind of paying attention to your food, you're going to get, kind of haphazard results. If you really want to be detailed about what results you can get, you do have to track your food. Food is by far, essentially, like what you're doing in training is you're creating a stimulus for change. Food and rest is how your body makes that change. If you don't eat the right types of foods or the right amounts of foods, the body can't fulfill all the changes that the training demands, so you're not going to really see great results. So definitely, it's a good step she did there, was if she was being active in training, but she wasn't necessarily kind of being super disciplined with her food, it would have been good for her to check in, make sure she wasn't under-eating, make sure she wasn't overeating, make sure she wasn't cycling back and forth between under-eating and overeating. So it was a really good step. She continues, "So since then, I have noticed some body composition changes, but nothing major, and my weight just doesn't seem to want to budge. It's a constant fluctuation between 129 to 132. I feel beyond frustrated, and this is typically about the time where I give up on myself, but I'm not going to do that this time." Hell yeah, good for you. I did Insanity, which is like a training program. Then Lift 4, I haven't heard of that one. And now I'm in week 3 of the first plan you wrote for me. Woohoo! There you go. And I typically get 35 to 40 minutes of walking in a day. Woo, man, okay. Well, if you're doing 35 to 40 minutes of walking, plus you're training quite often, definitely one of the things that kind of red flag for me is I wonder if they're eating enough. So we'll look at that here in a second. If you're wondering why in the world would I be worried about if they're eating enough, you're like, well, aren't they trying to lose fat? What the hell are you talking about? If they're under eating, isn't that going to help them lose fat? No, your body will actually fight against you losing fat, and that can be part of the reason why people plateau. So under eating is actually not really good for fat loss. I explained the concept of that along with the distribution of our calories, like when we eat, is how that's important as well. In podcast 1344, it's a recent one. I've talked about it 400 other times, but that's one of the more recent ones I did that explains why under eating isn't helpful for fat loss. That's podcast 1344, nutrition podcast titled Balancing the Books. So that would be a good one to check out. If you're wondering why in the world would I think that their issue of why they're stuck could be that they're actually under-eating. So they went on to write, "Now I was wondering if you could help me figure out how to continue building muscle, but focus on fat loss, because I feel like my wheels are just spinning here." This is actually a really interesting thing here. I'm actually highlighting it right now because we're gonna want to come back to that. And why is I'll see here in a second as I read more and learn more about this situation. But typically, if I look at this, okay, they're saying they want to build muscle and lose fat. Well, muscle has weight to it. Like our muscles they weigh something. If I have a pound of muscle, it weighs a pound. But they also want to lose fat. Well, if I take fat off of me, I lose weight. So a pound of fat weighs a pound. So if I'm trying to add the weight of muscle while losing the weight of fat, I have two things happening in the opposite direction that both influence my weight. So I have one element that is making my weight go up, building muscle. I have one element that's making my weight go down, fat loss. So it might be that she is achieving this, but she doesn't see it in the scale because as she's building muscle, that's adding weight. As she's losing fat, that's losing weight. So her weight is kind of stabilizing and staying the same. This is one of the things why tracking only a weight scale is super disappointing, because a weight scale just shows how much you weigh regardless of what that weight is coming from. Whether you're wearing, really heavy shoes or not wearing shoes, whether you have a ton of muscle or not a lot of muscle, whether you have fat, not fat. If you weigh 10 people in the world and they all weigh 150, you're going to get a bunch of random shapes of what 150 looks like, because somebody might be, 100 pounds of lean muscle tissue and 50 pounds of fat. Another person might be shredded with abs at 150, visible abs. So weight is not a great indicator of whether she's actually making progress or not. And this is a good phrase. So she's saying, if you could help me figure out how to build muscle but focus on fat loss. That might be why she's plateauing, especially because she's plateauing at 129 to 132. That's actually a really good, healthy weight for a female. So she might not actually want to weigh less, because that might actually start to be kind of like an unhealthier degree of strain on the body. So there's, for example, if women undereat, overexercise, they get too lean, they can lose their period, and that can cause a whole lot of kind of hormonal problems. So there is a body weight that might be best for her, and she's just continuing to lose fat and build muscle at that weight. So maybe when she started, she might have been 140. Maybe 145, and there was, more fat than there's more fat to lose than there was muscle to gain. So she's come down now to 130, and now all of a sudden her body's kind of normalized, and it's like, hey, for every little bit of muscle you're gaining, I'm losing about that much of fat, and we're slowly just going to change our kind of composition here. So, for example, I weigh 280 some pounds. I weighed myself recently, but I'm 280 something. Usually it fluctuates around 284 or 285. But if I was like, okay, I want to get six-pack abs, I want to be super shredded, I would want to lose fat, and I would end up probably weighing less, but I would try to weigh as little less as possible. That was a weird phrasing. But I don't want to weigh less, I just want to have fat off of me. The more I weigh less, the more overall weight I'm losing, which must mean that I wasn't as muscular as I thought I was, or that I would also be losing muscle along with the fat. If I can get super shredded but only lose, say 10 pounds of weight, that would be amazing, because I lost a ton of fat and probably built muscle. So my goal wouldn't be to weigh as much less as possible. My goal would be to weigh as little less as possible while getting lean, because that means I'm retaining and holding on to as much muscle and or building as much muscle. So what she might be noticing is she's at this kind of body weight where for her to go any lighter, she would have to start losing muscle tissue along with fat by underfeeding and overexercising, and we don't want to do that. So that's a kind of a cool phrase to kind of highlight here. She goes on, what would it cost me to get some help to get myself a better direction and to work with you to do that? So we do have our services. Now, I'm thankfully the business and myself are growing, so I'm always kind of tweaking as to how I can best help people. The issue I have throughout my entire career is I want to say yes to everyone, and then I don't do a very good job because I'm overstretched and just kind of I just can't give people enough time and attention to actually do my best job. So I've had to limit how many people I can help one-on-one, but I kind of countered the crappy feeling of doing that by doing this podcast, making it free so I can help as many people as possible while still being disciplined to help only a certain amount of people one-on-one so I don't get stretched too thin. So the services we do offer or on our website. If you go to brutalirongym.com, there's a services tab. And the way I'm doing kind of one-on-one coaching and clienting now, like client work now, is we have 3 options. The classic option is like $200 a month, where I do monthly programming for their nutrition and their training. We update nutrition at any time it ever needs to be updated. Training, I'll update it and edit it any time they need, but we typically rotate through new exercises, new movements every 4 weeks. We also do weekly communication, which kind of involves accountability. I check in on their nutrition tracking apps. I write down the foods and, the calorie amounts and all that stuff to make sure everything's on track. We do any video reviews. If somebody has any videos they want me to send, look at. So that's how I work with distant clients. So if they're not local, I have clients, for example, in 5 countries right now. So they send videos anytime we want to look at technique and review those things. Then I also have, there'll be competition prep support if somebody wants to do a competition with that. Then we do also have virtual consultation, like weekly virtual meetings. There's a holistic approach, which is $400 a month, and it focuses on everything, but it also includes emotional support kind of education. So if you're having issues with nutrition related to emotional and mental issues, and that plays itself out in how you eat and the way you take care of yourself physically, we do virtual consultations as well as doing the nutrition programming, training programming, weekly communication, video reviews, anything like that. And then I also have a business service where I help personal trainers just develop their business, which is super freaking fun. I love that one a lot. But those are the 3 services I have right now. They're keeping me maxed out busy, so I'm very blessed and very lucky. But those would be the ways in which you can get help. We also do have 1-hour consultations where I'll do either over the phone or in person, and we just kind of talk about whatever your issues might be. And then there's other things that wouldn't relate to this case right now, but that is kind of the services. Those are the services, I guess it's better English. Those are the services that we offer. So I'll be reaching out to this person after I send them this podcast, that way they get more help, and we'll see which kind of road they want to go down. But they also attached photos, and they attached a photo of their app, I guess their nutrition app, and it has the calories that it calculated. Okay, so if we look through this, if I look through the photos, they've actually made awesome progress in body composition change. Exceptional. You can see much more muscle definition, especially in their upper back. Congratulations. And then also around their waistline and their hips and thighs. You look great. That was a huge change. Good for you. Yeah. So she's definitely doing what we said about the body composition change. She has much more definition, especially in her midsection, her abs, better shape to her thighs, glutes, shoulders, upper back. So you're kicking ass. Good for you. So definitely can see compositional change. So the weight scale might not be moving, but you can absolutely see that you are still losing body fat, and therefore if the weight scale is not moving but you are leaner, you're definitely gaining muscle tissue. So congratulations, you look awesome. Good for you. That's great. Okay, so now what I would look for in given all this information, now that I've rambled for 15 minutes, is nutrition. What we want to do is, you can actually do this for yourself. You would go to podcast 1232. It's a nutrition podcast titled Start Here. You literally would go through the steps that I give in that podcast in order to see, okay, of what I'm doing, am I following the parameters that are explained in that podcast? This is exactly what I will do to the client like this, is I would say, okay, what are they doing now? How does that compare to what I know works best? So the first thing we look at is calories. Are they controlling their calories? So the nutrition app they sent says that their calories should be 1,426. Now, if we kind of go through that podcast, the 1,232, the nutrition podcast title Start Here, it will explain a little bit more detail in a slower process to what I'm about to ramble through in today's podcast. So if you want to learn it in a slower way, that would definitely be a good podcast to look at. So calorie-wise, we know if I want to get in the ballpark of how many calories I should eat, it would be body weight times 13. Now, there's actually a range of 11 to 15. Bodyweight times 11 is if somebody's very sedentary, they don't do much, they don't really exercise. So that's kind of the lower end. Bodyweight times 15 is if they're super active and they're very busy, they train a lot. I have some clients, they're super active, they train a lot, and they have an active job, so they eat like bodyweight times 17. So it varies, but very rarely do I ever go under bodyweight times 11. So most people, if they're looking to lose weight, which this person's trying to lose body fat, so let's say it better that way. If they're wanting to lose body fat, but they still want to sustain their muscle and or try to develop new muscle, we want to look for bodyweight times 13 on training days, bodyweight times 11 on non-training days. And then we want to have protein around 1 gram per pound of body weight. That's going to reduce and kind of like restrict the amount of carbs and fats they have, which is our energy nutrients, which will promote the body to break down and burn body fat to provide energy as well. But we want to keep that protein around 1 gram per pound of body weight so that we can sustain muscle tissue health and repair so we don't lose any muscle tissue. So what we're going to look to do for her is we're going to say, okay, that app is telling you to have probably the same calories per day. That's not really the benefit here. Is if we have days we're more active, it's okay to eat more. If we have days we're less active, it's okay to eat less. We don't want to pick, only one value and some days be severely overeating and some days be severely undereating. Again, that goes back to that balancing the books kind of podcast where you want to make sure you have the numbers correct. So let's say that she's weighing around 130 right now. 130 times 13 is 1690. So 1690. I think like weird numbers are impossible to remember, so I always round stuff over. So we're going to call her training day target to be 1600 to 1700. Okay. So that's going to be her training day values. And all I did there was I took body weight times 13 and then just kind of rounded it off to nearby numbers, gave her a little bit of a range. It's impossible to eat an exact number of calories every single day. You definitely want to have a range of calories. If you're brand new to being disciplined in nutrition, you want that range to be big. Maybe 300-400 calorie range. If you're more disciplined and as you get more comfortable, you want to narrow that range down to 200, maybe even down to 100. But I very rarely ask anybody to be in a smaller range than 100. So, for example, telling her to be between 1600 and 1700, that's actually pretty damn hard. Whereas we're not able to eat the exact same foods at the exact same time every single day. It just doesn't happen. That's not real life. So giving people a little bit of a range is a good idea. Now, non-training days, we said that it's, we want to be closer maybe down to that body weight times 11. So if we're looking at 130 times 11, that's 1430. So 1430. So if you notice, her app was giving her 1426. So that's kind of right at that number. So it's right at what we're talking about. But the problem might be is that she's overactive for that calorie count. So we talked about where body weight times 11 is like very low activity, not doing much. Well, if she's like weight training, like resistance training, doing those workouts, and she's going for walks, man, her body's way the hell past 1430 on her active days. So she might be actually underfed. Therefore, her body is not willing to give up any more body fat. So what we're going to look at is if she's been doing 1430, and that doesn't seem to be kind of working, it's underfed. We're going to keep her at 1400 to 1500 calories on non-training days. So if you're just walking, so it's just walking or total day off. Okay. Training days, we're going to be between 1600 to 1700 calories, and that means that you did actual workouts. So actual workout on that day. So that's going to be the first thing we look to do is her calories were 1430, it's body weight times 11, and that was sustained every day. That's underfed. That's too low. So we've got to give our body a little more calories coming in so that way it doesn't feel like the calories it's retaining, aka body fat, are so important to retain. So our body retains body fat to protect organs, to allow it to still be able to move and do things. So it's important for us to have the ability to store body fat. Why it was created, because we'd have periods of times where we were overfed and underfed. When you were overfed, the body saves the excess to protect itself from times of being underfed. So our target goal would be is to not be underfed to any significant degree, but we also don't want to be overfed. We want to try to be perfect. We want to try to match our caloric usage. The more we match our caloric usage, the less likely the body is to try to save anything or fight that anything comes off. So that's going to be the first thing we look at is training days are now 1,600 to 1,700 calories. Non-training days are 1,400 to 1,500 calories. She's going to keep that going on a regular basis. That will all of a sudden start helping her get a lot leaner. Then if we look at protein, we know that protein should be about 1 gram per pound of body weight. Right now, the app is telling her 120 grams. We're going to bump that up a smidge. We're going to go to 130 since that's kind of what you're weighing at right now. Now, we do want to give a range, like we said, because, it's impossible to hit the exact number. So let's go 120 to 140 as your range. So if you're in the range of 120 to 140 grams protein every day, that'll be great. Now, we don't do a non-training day versus a training day. The reason why is on non-training days, your muscles are still recovering from the previous day's training. Muscle tissue repair, especially if you do resistance training, like externally loaded training, like with weights and stuff, weights and machines and whatnot, that could take 12, 24, even longer hours to fully repair. So 24 hours after that workout, your body's still busy trying to fix and repair those tissues. So even like what looks like a non-training day, you still have a high protein demand. You might not have a high energy demand, but you still have a high protein demand on those days. So we're going to aim for 120 to 140 grams of protein every day. Distribution. Now, we didn't talk about when she's eating her calories, so I want her to focus on what we call thirds, just third distributions. So in the first 5 to 6 hours of being awake, eat a third of your calories in protein. In the second 5 to 6 hours of being awake, eat a third of your calories in protein. In the final 5 to 6 hours of being awake, eat a third of your calories in protein. So you can eat it in 1 meal, 2 meals, 3 meals, however you want to do it. It doesn't matter how many meals per 5 to 6 hours. You just want to consume about 1/3 of your calories in protein per 5 to 6 hours of the day. So that's going to be great. Then we want to look at macronutrient timing. So carbs versus fats. Does it matter how many carbs I have a day, exactly how many fats I have a day? Nope, doesn't matter at all. Doesn't impact fat loss much. So there's no predetermined amount of carbs and fats that you should have, because carbs and fats should be eaten based on what you're doing at the time of the meal. If you predetermine carbs and fats, you're just unnecessarily following things that are very restrictive and annoying to do. So don't do that. Podcast 1021 is a nutrition podcast titled How Much Carbs and Fats Do I Need? That'll answer that in further detail. In general, when you're active, you want to eat more carbohydrates. When you're less active, you want to focus more towards fats. Is it okay if you have both fats and carbs in the same meal? Sure. If you accidentally have fats during the day, is that the worst thing in the world? Hell no. If you accidentally have carbs before you go to bed, is that the worst thing in the world? Hell no. It's just in general, carbs digest faster, so you want to eat them during the day when you need the energy more, like you need it at a faster rate. And then fats digest slower, and since if you go to bed, you're going to be laying on your back not doing nothing, eating fats before bed is a better kind of focus. So carbs and proteins during the day, fats and proteins at night. That's a good way to distribute it. The other thing I would look for is, for example, do we have sugars outside of our training time? Sugar pre-workout and during a workout are great energy source. Nothing wrong with that. However, if it's if I worked out in the morning and it's 4 in the afternoon and I have 50 grams of sugar, it's probably not the best idea. So you do want to avoid sugars outside of training times. So you would look to reduce that, whether it's from sugary candy or even fruit. You want to use more slower digesting carbohydrates, not sugars. One of the reasons why sugars digest very fast, so they provide a momentary surplus of nutrients, and then your body might, if it's been underfed throughout the day, it might try to save those and convert that to body fat. But then, since it digests so quickly, you're left without any energy right afterwards once it digests, and then your body's grumpy because it doesn't have enough energy, so it'll reluctantly use body fat, but only the minimal amount needed, and then it fights to replace that later on. So when you have something that's very fast digesting, but yet you're not doing very fast activity, it can promote fat formation and then fat prevention and then fat formation later. So it has big negative issues. The other thing we look for is complexity of foods. You want to make sure that you're eating as much whole foods as possible. There's a term called thermic effect of food, which refers to how many calories you burn trying to break down the foods that you eat. So if you focus on more whole foods most of the day, you're going to do better at just kind of feeling better, leaner, less water retention. You're going to burn more calories through that nutrient like how your body has to break the food down. That contributes maybe only 5 to 10% to your total daily calories. But, hey, if somebody told me I can get 5% better, I'd be like, hell yeah, I'll do that. So that's something to look at. And then from there, that's pretty much going to be what we would look to do. In general, what I'm asking myself is, when I look through what a person's doing, is what can they do that they haven't done yet? Have they been tracking and monitoring their calories? Are they doing caloric cycling? Are they matching training days and non-training days, or even training? Protein, are they controlling protein? Is it the right amount? Are they doing proper distribution throughout the day? Are they having mostly carbs throughout the day and mostly fats at night? So there are a lot of circumstances in which all of these things may change. Like I have some clients, when they're on very low calories trying to get ready for a competition, they might eat more fats throughout the day, because that helps them feel fuller for longer. So they might not focus on carbohydrates during the day because their calories are so limited right now and kind of controlled that they would rather have fats, so it keeps them feeling fuller throughout the day. So there's 40 billion individual circumstances in which some of these things might be a little different. But this is the recommendation I would give for her nutrition. So as we said, you would do bodyweight times 13 on training days, bodyweight times 11 on non-training days. Create a range, an easy to remember range. So not like 1621 to 1743. No one's going to remember that stuff. So 1600 to 1700, good for her on training day. 1400 to 1500, good for her on non-training day. Protein, 1 gram per pound of body weight. Distribution, 1/3 every 5 to 6 hours. Try to eat more carbs during the day, more fats at night. Limit sugars outside of training time. Try to focus on more whole foods than liquids. Awesome. If most people do that, you're going to get freaking all the best results in the world. So listen to podcast 1232, go through the steps like I just did, and see what you can do that you haven't done yet, and what will help. Next, if we look at training, I know this is a long one, so hopefully you brought, your a note card or something with you, or you can pause it right now and come back to this tomorrow. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at her training. So the type of training she's doing, I'm not familiar with all of those different training styles, and I could understand if somebody's kind of point of view is like, this is what you do for a living. How do you not know like what insanity is, what Lift 4 is, and all these other things? It's because there's 40 million of them. There's like 4 million different workout structures and stuff. So I don't want to bother trying to keep up with that, because categorically they're not that different. So, something might be named this and named that, but they're both bodyweight movements. So bodyweight training in general is good for like beginners to lose fat and build some strength around joints and to gain some muscle tissue in their weakest areas. But eventually, bodyweight doesn't work very well unless you get into plyometrics, calisthenics, and a bunch of like other crazy crap. But most people don't do that. So bodyweight training, when done with greater intensity, can still develop nice balanced musculature, strong joints, and you can have a good body composition. But in general, for most people, they do need to get to actually lifting some weights. You have to challenge the muscle tissue with external resistance greater than your own body weight. And then some people, they're not even strong enough to do their own body weight. So that's why it's just not healthy for the joints to start doing their own body weight right away. In general, what I try to promote people to do is actually to lift weights. If you do things that damage muscle tissue, that will not only help you like build muscle and better shape muscle, but it helps you lose fat faster. We have podcast 181 is a training podcast titled Using Muscle Damage for Fat Loss that explains how, even if somebody's only goal is to lose body fat, damaging muscle tissue is incredibly important and incredibly beneficial. So what I'd like to do is, I'm looking at their training. Say this is a person who says they want to improve their body composition. They want to have more muscle and they want to be leaner, but all they were doing was walking. Well, clearly that's not going to work. Walking doesn't help build muscle tissue, so that's not going to be a good thing. We have to make sure that whatever their training type is, that it matches their goals. So with what she's doing now that she went back to the program I wrote for her years ago, I know that that's going to work because it's an externally loaded program. It has a lot of things in there to work on thoracic mobility, core strength and shaping, hip mobility and glute shaping. So I know that that's going to be a good program. So I would encourage her or anyone to do some type of program that does involve external loading. 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes, maybe Maybe if you do an hour, 30 to 60 minutes, if you can do that, 3, 4, 5 times a week, that's kick ass. I have some clients that just do 20-minute workouts 4 times a week, but it works for their goals. It works for their, kind of schedule. So the idea is to be consistent and to do something that challenges your body. Okay, now, that's going to be basically what I'd recommend she does, is use the program that I wrote for you. I know that's going to work. So if you're a little bored with that, or if you've never gotten a program from me, you can check out podcast 1205. It's a training podcast titled Free Programming. I literally give away 4 months of free programming. So definitely check that out if you want to check that out. That programming is general, meaning I didn't write it for you. I don't know who you are. So I would love to write for you, so please let me know who you are. But it's written for just anybody I think that would like, if you're working towards those goals that are in the programming, it's how would somebody get to those goals if they started from a general starting position. Now, that means that it's somewhat specific, somewhat not specific. It might be right where you are. It might be a little bit too beginnery for you. It might be a smidge too advanced. But that's something to check out as an option. It's free. Podcast 1205. Okay. Now, check that out. See if that helps. But this is what we would do when somebody sends in either that they want to become a client or something like this where they just want some feedback. Is I go through essentially the steps that I explain in podcast 1232, which is a nutrition podcast titled Start Here. So I go through those steps, see where they're at based on all the information I give in that podcast. I figure out what have they not done yet that they could do that could get them some good results. So we went through that with the nutrition. Hopefully you can do that for yourself. Training-wise, try to be as active as you can, as many days as you can. Resistance training is going to be the best way to be active. And then once you've maximized your ability to recover from that, then things like walking or general movement can be beneficial. Okay? Well, I hope this was helpful. I'm going to send this to the listener who sent in this kind of email. And then I'm also going to follow up with her and see if she wants to do kind of coaching. So that way I can help personalize the nutrition information, help with accountability, help answer questions about, which foods are best for which times of the day and which availability she has, what her daily schedule is, if she has any digestive issues, sometimes people have celiac disease and they don't know how to eat around that, lactose intolerance. They have a crazy work schedule where they don't get to have access to easily available foods. Maybe they can't cook in the middle of the day. There's 40 million different issues. So that's where the individualized coaching helps, is how do you apply the right calorie and protein numbers. It's nice to know how to, where you want to go, but how do you get there efficiently? And that's kind of the part I can help with. So if you have any questions or if you want any help, just email me, brutalironjim@gmail.com. I appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. I hope you got something good from this one. If you need anything, I'm always here. Well, if you like today's podcast or the podcast in general, please consider sharing the podcast. The more people we share it with, the more people can help, and that's the whole goal. The whole reason why we do this every day is just to help as many people as I can outside of the people I help one-on-one. Thank you to the patrons of the podcast, the people who financially support the podcast, so we all have something to listen to every day. So we all had this learning opportunity. So thank you sincerely to the people who financially support the podcast. It's well over $1,000 a year for hosting costs. I give an hour to it every single day. I would love to keep it for free. I would love to keep it without 4 million ads in it. So I really appreciate everybody's donations. It's the only way that this makes any remote sense, so I'm not losing more money by doing this. But I love it. I'm going to try to keep doing it forever. Also, if you do like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything that you want to know, let us know at our email, brutalironjim@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.